My name is Elias Darnell, and for 33 years, I was the man Titan Aerotech trusted to keep its name clean. I joined them straight out of college, when it was just 8 of us in a rented garage on the outskirts of Spokane. Back then, we were assembling prototype drone components by hand, surviving on coffee, patents, and wild ambition. Today, Titan supplies aerospace parts to defense contractors and commercial carriers across the western U.S., with operations spanning 3 states and over 280 employees. I've lived through acquisitions, automation waves, 2 recessions, and the impossible deadlines of government bids. Through it all, I ensured we never once failed an FAA compliance audit. And now, just 23 days before my pension matures, I'm being eliminated. Effective immediately, your position is being dissolved due to organizational streamlining, Grayson Thorne, the new CFO, said without flinching. He didn't look up as he slid the envelope across his spotless desk. The surface looked like it had never seen a pen mark, polished mahogany under the dim amber of the overhead lights, the kind of desk that screams importance without needing to say a word. I didn't reach for the envelope. Not yet. Grayson adjusted his cufflinks like we were at a board dinner. He was 39, maybe 40. Slick. Clinical. Came from some boutique consultancy that specialized in capital agility. I'd Googled the term when he joined. It meant cutting costs that took years to build. Your severance includes 10 weeks of salary and accrued PTO. It's a fair offer, Elias. I raised an eyebrow. 10 weeks in exchange for 33 years of loyalty? This isn't personal, he said, like that made it better. We're consolidating all compliance functions under legal. It's an efficiency pivot. Efficiency. That's how they framed betrayal now. I kept my voice even. Company policy protects employees within 30 days of retirement eligibility. Grayson looked mildly surprised. He masked it quickly. We've cleared this with our legal advisors. You'll find everything documented. Of course it was. Documented, revised, lawyer-proofed. Everything designed to look legitimate on paper. I took the envelope and placed it in my leather folio without opening it. I'll need time to review. You have until Friday at 5 p.m. to sign. After that, the package is void. I stood, buttoned my jacket, and shook his hand, not out of respect, but to watch how steady his grip was. It trembled slightly. He was nervous. He wasn't expecting pushback. That was my first clue something was wrong. I walked past the glass walls of Titan's headquarters lobby, catching my reflection as I passed. Gray suit, steel-rimmed glasses, salt and pepper hair combed neatly back. I didn't look like someone they'd casually discard. But then again, people like Grayson didn't see experience. They saw expense. My corner office was still untouched when I returned to the 12th floor. Same place I'd sat for 8 years, watching the Spokane skyline grow more vertical every season. I passed Nina's desk, my assistant, and tried to avoid eye contact. But she caught me. Elias. Her voice was cautious. Is it true? I nodded once. They're eliminating my role. Her face twisted in disbelief. But the NAR audit is in 3 weeks. You're the only one with clearance. They'll manage, I said, though we both knew they wouldn't. I opened my office door. The air inside felt still, like a room waiting for a final breath. On my bookshelf were binders going back 2 decades, manuals, certifications, contracts. On the wall, a framed commendation from the Air Safety Board. A photo of my team at the Seattle launch facility. And on my desk, a ceramic mug that read "Never flinch during inspection," gifted to me by a junior inspector who'd watched me disarm a combative Pentagon auditor with a single clause in our codebook. I started packing. Nina lingered at my door again. They can't just do this, she said, eyes wide. You're 20-something days away from retirement. Isn't there some rule? There is, I said. They're sidestepping it. I boxed up my desk methodically. The whiteboard markers I brought from home because there's always dried out, the cufflink box my late wife gave me before our last anniversary trip to Vancouver, a framed photo of us from that trip, hiking the Capilano Trail. As I reached for the photo, my hand trembled. Not from sadness, but from restraint. I wanted to shatter every item in that office. But I wouldn't. Not yet. Let them think I was walking away quietly. That night, I sat at my kitchen table in Mead with the severance agreement open on my laptop. I had uploaded it to a private encrypted folder and started highlighting. Clause 14.3. I'd be agreeing that the termination was due to department elimination for financial restructuring. Clause 16.1. I'd be barred from discussing the matter with any Titan Aerotech employee, past or present. Clause 18.4. I'd be acknowledging that the departure was not performance-based, but also not eligible for retirement benefits. They were trying to write history in legalese. And worse, they were trying to silence me. I called Walter Greaves the next morning. He answered in his usual gruff tone. You finally taking up fishing? Walter, I was let go yesterday. 23 days before my pension vests. Silence. Then, that's not random, Elias. I didn't think so either. Walter had been HR director at Titan for 12 years before retiring 9 months ago. He'd mentored me back in my early days and remained one of the only people I trusted after the new exec wave reshaped the company. You ever hear the term pension stripping? He asked. I've heard the theory. Well, Titan's not the first company to do it. My last employer in Arizona tried it. We caught them staging early exits for senior staff just before vesting deadlines. Saved them millions. Cost them more in court. I exhaled slowly. You have any documentation? Walter paused. Come to Coeur d'Alene tomorrow. Bring a hard drive. I barely slept that night. My mind kept turning over the timing, the slick delivery, Grayson's barely concealed nerves. This wasn't a fluke. This wasn't a cost-cutting maneuver. This was a targeted extraction, designed to make me vanish without protest. But I wasn't going quietly. I had no more reputation to protect. No future to gamble. No ladder to climb. All I had left was the truth. And the truth was going to cost them. The next morning, I left home before dawn and drove across the Washington-Idaho border into Coeur d'Alene. It had rained overnight, and fog clung to the trees like ghosts that hadn't yet decided to leave. Walter's house sat on a quiet residential street with a porch that smelled faintly of pipe tobacco and old cedar. He was waiting with 2 mugs of coffee and a grim expression. Figured you'd want caffeine more than sympathy, he said. I took the cup and followed him inside, into a room that looked more like a detective's den than a retiree's office. His desk was covered in printed emails, notepads, flash drives, and manila folders labeled in all caps with names I recognized. Thought you might need receipts, Walter said as he booted up his old ThinkPad. So I've been digging. He slid a document toward me. Start with this. I leaned forward. It was an internal memo dated 3 months after Grayson Thorne joined Titan. The subject line, Legacy Cost Exposure and Mitigation Strategies. I read aloud. Preliminary modeling indicates that a significant reduction in long-term pension liabilities can be achieved through selective restructuring of departments with high seniority personnel. Legal recommends eliminating roles prior to vesting thresholds where permissible by contract. I looked up. They're not even hiding it. Walter gave a dry laugh. Corporate transparency, just not to the right people. He pulled another file from the pile and handed me a color-coded spreadsheet. At the top, Pension Exposure Review, Confidential. My name was on it. So were 4 others, Craig Holloway, IT, Marla Green, Sales, Eric Nakamura, Logistics, and a 5th name I didn't recognize, Leland Cho, who'd apparently taken early retirement last year. Next to each name was a column labeled Proposed Phase-Out Timeline. My termination date was listed precisely. So was the severance amount. The next scheduled removal? Craig Holloway, just 4 weeks from now. Elias, Walter said, tapping the page. This is strategy, not coincidence. They've built a paper trail that looks like compliance. But what they're doing, it's engineered betrayal. I felt my jaw tighten. We need to stop it. Walter nodded. I know someone who can help. That afternoon, we scheduled a secure Zoom call with Leo Franklin, a labor rights attorney Walter had worked with during a similar case in Arizona. The man was soft-spoken, with the intensity of someone who had spent years listening to lies and learning how to unravel them in court. After reviewing the documents, Leo spoke carefully. This isn't just about wrongful termination. This is premeditated pension manipulation. If we prove it's systematic, you're looking at a case that could trigger federal oversight. Good, I said. They deserve worse. Leo smiled thinly. They will. But we need more than intent. We need a pattern, evidence that this wasn't isolated, and that other employees were targeted using the same tactics. Walter handed me a flash drive. That's where you come in. When I got back home to Meade, I plugged in the drive and opened a folder labeled Darnell Compliance. Inside were PDFs of my last 8 performance evaluations, each marked Exceeds Expectations. I found copies of project milestones I'd led, including the FAA emergency certification Titan secured 2 years ago because I fast-tracked internal audits. I found a letter from the Department of Transportation, thanking me by name for resolving a cross-border parts shipment error that could have triggered federal fines. Every piece of paper screamed value. Every document proved I was no liability. And they took it all the moment I left. Nina had called me just after I left Grayson's office. Said 2 men she didn't recognize had entered my office and taken every file, even my backup drives. That's when it clicked. They weren't cleaning up. They were covering tracks. The next morning, I called Nina using an encrypted messaging app Walter had installed for me. "Elias," she said, surprised. "Are you okay?" "I'm not calling for sympathy," I said. "I need your help." Nina didn't hesitate. "Tell me what to do." I explained what we'd found, the spreadsheets, the emails, the timeline. She didn't say a word until I finished. Then, Craig was called into HR this morning. Nobody's seen him since. My stomach dropped. "They're accelerating." She hesitated. "I overheard something weird 2 days ago." Grayson was in a meeting with legal. He said something about insulating the transition team from retroactive liability. I didn't know what it meant, but now I think I do. I paused. "Nina, are you willing to document what you've seen?" "Yes," she said immediately. "They tried to erase you, Elias. That's not going to happen." Over the next 5 days, we worked quietly. Walter dug up old policy manuals and historical pension guidelines showing that Titan had clearly defined protections for employees within 30 days of vesting. Leo drafted the legal complaint. Nina documented every suspicious event since my departure. Who accessed my files, who gave the order, what was said in hushed tones around HR. And I built the story. I created a secure folder titled Operation Fusebox. Inside it, I laid out a timeline. I highlighted every inconsistency. I annotated every memo. I mapped every executive action to an employee's departure. And then I leaked it. On a Friday evening, the file went to a journalist I trusted from the business ethics podcast, The Corporate Reckoning. Her name was Zara Kane, and she had taken down 2 firms in the last 3 years. One for OSHA violations, another for union busting in Oregon. She didn't deal in clickbait. She dealt in consequences. She called me 2 hours after receiving the files. "You just handed me the blueprint to corporate sabotage," she said. "No," I corrected her. "I just handed you the bill for 33 years of loyalty." By Monday, the first episode dropped. Betrayal at 30,000 feet, the Titan pension plot. It was an audio punch to the gut. Zara laid out the story like a thriller. Elias Darnell, Aerospace Compliance Director, terminated days before retirement. A spreadsheet with names. A CFO with a history of efficiency cleanses. A policy violation hidden beneath glossy severance packages. And now, the beginnings of a class action storm. Within 24 hours, the episode hit number 3 on Apple's business charts. Within 48, Titan Aerotech was trending on Reddit. Within 72, 3 former employees reached out to Leo with identical severance scenarios, all just shy of their pension vesting mark. Grayson called me the next day. I didn't answer. Let him stew in his office, the same one where he tried to erase 3 decades with a printed envelope and an empty smile. This wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about exposure. And exposure was just beginning. 3 days after the podcast went live, Titan Aerotech issued a formal statement. It was 6 paragraphs of legal air. "We take employee concerns seriously. We are conducting an internal review. The decisions made reflect business necessities in a competitive market environment." But the internet didn't care about press releases. They cared about people like me, veterans who gave everything to a company and got steamrolled when we became too expensive. And they especially cared about proof, which we had. That Friday, I met Leo Franklin in person for the first time. He had flown in from Seattle and set up shop in a co-working space in downtown Spokane. "You've got momentum," he said, tapping his laptop. "We've filed complaints with the Department of Labor, the State Pension Board, and the Office of Federal Contractor Compliance. But now the class action component is growing." "How many?" I asked. 8 plaintiffs, including you, all terminated within 45 days of their retirement eligibility, all under vague restructuring claims. I leaned back. "Grayson's going to panic." Leo nodded. "He already has. Titan's board just hired external counsel. But here's where it gets tricky." He pulled up a screen with an email leak. Someone inside the plaintiff group may be leaking information to Grayson. I stared at him. What? One of the terminated employees, Leland Cho, reached out to our team, pretending to be eager to help. But shortly after he received access to our evidence folder, key timestamps changed. And 2 days later, Grayson's lawyers preemptively rebutted arguments we hadn't even filed yet. My stomach sank. You think Cho's a mole? I think he was offered something. Possibly a quiet job offer from one of Titan's vendors. Maybe even a hush payout. But it's clear he's trying to sabotage the case. I stared at the screen, fury brewing behind my ribs. One of us had flipped. That night, I stared at my living room ceiling, the light from my laptop flickering as I went back through the encrypted logs. Sure enough, Cho had accessed our case files 5 times more than anyone else, and had downloaded PDFs with key evidence about Titan's pension policy gaps. Walter called just after midnight. You see it too? Yeah, he's not just leaking. He's manipulating. I found one file with altered metadata. It looks like he edited an old HR memo to make it seem like Titan had a performance justification for his own firing. But that memo didn't exist. I wrote the original. I rubbed my forehead. We need to confront him. Quietly. Carefully. Walter agreed. Let me handle it. I know how to box a liar into a corner. On Monday, Walter invited Leland Cho to a strategy huddle via encrypted video. I sat in silently, off camera, while Walter smiled and made small talk. Then he asked a question only someone with real clearance would know. Hey, Leland, do you remember the memo we sent out in 21 about the benefits freeze for non-union staff? The one with the adjustment appendix. Cho blinked. Yeah, I think so. Walter smiled wider. Great. What did Appendix C cover? A beat. Then another. Then, I don't think I remember the specifics. There was no Appendix C, Walter said quietly. There was no freeze in 2021. That was a bluff. And you failed it. Cho's face turned gray. Walter leaned in. We know you accessed our files. We know you edited documents. And we know you've been feeding Grayson's team. Cho disconnected without a word. The next morning, Leo filed a motion to remove Cho from the plaintiff list. Simultaneously, we sent evidence of document tampering to the state's attorney general. But even more important, we used Cho's access as a trap. Walter and Leo prepared a bait file. A fake memo labeled whistleblower summary for federal filing, urgent, containing false details about a fictional employee and a new timeline of events that painted Titan in a slightly different light. 2 hours after Cho's download, that same misinformation showed up in Titan's counterargument submission to the Department of Labor. It was a smoking gun, proof that Titan's defense team was using confidential whistleblower materials leaked by an insider. We now had evidence not just of pension abuse, but of active obstruction. Meanwhile, things inside Titan were starting to implode. Nina messaged me discreetly that Monday night. Emergency compliance meeting today. 2 major contracts under review. One client flagged our QA certs. No one knew what to do without you. I asked her to be cautious. But she ignored me. The next morning, she emailed the Department of Transportation herself, attaching an unsigned compliance log that Grayson had tried to fudge. It showed fake audit confirmations on a defense-grade material, one that, if traced, could shut down Titan's main supplier. By noon, investigators were on site. I was eating lunch when my phone lit up with a number I didn't recognize. I let it go to voicemail. A minute later, a text came through. We need to talk. Before this destroys the company. Grayson. He sounded panicked. Too late. Zara Kane's podcast dropped its 2nd episode that same night. The Mole and the Machine. She told the story of how one of the plaintiffs betrayed the case. She revealed how Titan's legal team had used leaked whistleblower files in their defense. She even interviewed a .compliance officer anonymously, who confirmed Titan's audit logs were now under federal review. And then she dropped the bombshell. Next week, we'll be publishing exclusive emails linking Titan Aerotech's executive team directly to a pension suppression strategy they've denied even existed. Grayson's career wasn't just in trouble. It was in free fall. Back at Walter's house, we reviewed the final folder he had prepared before his own departure from Titan. Inside was a gem, a presentation Grayson had given to the board 6 months ago, arguing that the company could increase profitability by eliminating 12 high-burden roles before the fiscal year closed. Slides were labeled with euphemisms: headcount optimization, legacy role reduction, and cost-to-benefit employment analysis. But the names were listed in the slide notes. Mine was first. Walter sat back, arms crossed. "What's your next move?" I looked at the laptop screen, the pile of documents beside it, the surge of public support online, and the legal team preparing for war. "My next move," I said. "I'm going to make them regret ever hiring Grayson Thorne." The following Monday, it all came crashing down. I was sipping coffee on my back porch, early morning mist hanging low over the treetops, when my phone buzzed nonstop. 5 missed calls, 9 texts, and an encrypted message from Leo marked urgent. Department of Labor has launched formal investigation. SEC now reviewing Titan's retirement disclosures. We're officially class action certified. Lawsuit is greenlit. It was happening. The truth had finally broken through. That afternoon, Zara Kane dropped her third and final episode of the podcast. The episode ended with a gut punch, a quote from me. I didn't lose my job. I was silenced for being expensive, and I refused to disappear quietly. By Tuesday, news outlets had picked it up. Business Week, the Seattle Herald, and even Reuters ran headlines. Whistleblower exposes pension suppression scheme at aerospace supplier. Veteran compliance director takes down executive sabotage ring. Investors started asking questions. Government contractors flagged Titan for review. 2 clients froze their current projects, citing pending regulatory concerns. And then came the hammer. At 10:44 a.m. on Wednesday, Titan Aerotech's board issued a public statement. Effective immediately, Grayson Thorne has been placed on administrative leave pending the outcome of internal and federal investigations. The company is reevaluating its compliance structure and retirement practices. Nina called me that evening, whispering like someone who'd just walked through a battlefield. "Elias, the office is chaos. Legal's scrambling. HR's paralyzed. The Phoenix site lost its audit clearance. They didn't even have the documentation chain you built. And Grayson, I heard he cleaned out his office in 30 minutes flat." I smiled into my coffee. "And the board? They've started backtracking everything. Guess what's back on the table?" I already knew. "My department?" She laughed. "With your name all over the procedures, yes. 3 clients have already demanded proof of compliance continuity. They can't function without it." 2 days later, Titan's lawyer called Leo with a tone of desperation. "We'd like to propose settlement terms. Privately. Generously." Leo's response: "We'll see you at the table." With press. The following week, I walked into the mediation room flanked by Leo, Walter, and 2 other plaintiffs. Across the table sat Titan's remaining legal team, visibly nervous. The room felt cold and silent except for the low hum of the overhead AC, or maybe that was just the sound of their foundation cracking. Leo laid out our terms calmly, like a surgeon presenting a procedure. Full pension reinstated for all class members. A retroactive damages for wrongful termination. A legal fee coverage. A written apology. And the kicker, reinstatement of the compliance department under independent oversight for 18 months. They blinked. They shifted. They asked for a recess. When they returned, they accepted. I didn't want my old office back, but I did want accountability. So I agreed to one final gesture. I'd conduct a 3-month transition audit to rebuild the shattered compliance framework, under one condition. Grayson's name would be erased from all strategic records. He wouldn't get to leave a legacy of streamlining. He'd be remembered as the man who tried to gut the soul of a company and got caught in his own trap. On my last day at Titan, this time on my terms, I walked the halls slowly. People I'd trained nodded respectfully. A few stopped me and thanked me. One even teared up. "You saved a lot of us," she whispered. "No," I said. "I just made sure they didn't forget who built this place." Back home, I poured a glass of scotch and stood by the window, looking out at the ridgeline as the sun dropped below the evergreens. I wasn't bitter anymore. I was vindicated. The pension they tried to steal now came with interest. The department they tried to erase was now enshrined in oversight. And the executive who thought I was a quiet exit wound, he now had my name burned into his resume forever. I sat back in my chair, opened the newspaper, and read the final headline with satisfaction. Justice for the long game, how Elias Darnell exposed one of the industry's worst pension scams. And beneath it, a quote from an anonymous board member. "We underestimated the quiet ones. Elias didn't burn the building down. He made sure it collapsed on the right people." Thanks for watching. Please subscribe for justice, loyalty, and truth.